We are live here in Diego Garcia.
Thank you very much, William. God, I hope I can sing like that, but only in my dreams, I guess.
So this is Independence Day celebration.
Okay, so to continue with the program, this short video clip titled Easy Peasy.
An easy peasy history of the Philippines. The Philippines, birthplace of boxer Manny Pacquiao and the Black Eyed Peas member Apple Diab. Home of binturongs, they smell like popcorn, really. Over 30 volcanoes and delicious, delicious foods. Seafood, fresh fruit, cheap alcohol. Did we mention the banana ketchup? Yep, that is a real thing in the Philippines. If you think all of that sounds pretty great, well, we're here to tell you that it really is that great. But how did the Philippines become the Philippines of beautiful culture and wonderful foods? A place where tourists can see volcanoes and whale sharks. Easy peasy. Let's look at some history and figure it out. The Philippines is an archipelagic county, which means it's made up of a lot of little islands. Almost 8,000, only 2,000 are inhabited. In fact, over 2,500 of them are not even named, and more are being discovered every day. Around 25,000 years ago, an indigenous people of dark complexion, called Negritos, traveled from a land bridge in Asia over to the island of the Philippines. Easy peasy. The Negritos would be considered the first people to inhabit the Philippines. There is some archaeologic evidence that there may have been people on the islands many thousands of years before then, but it's still a bit up in the air. In 3000 BCE, 200 BCE, the first Malayan settlers arrived from South China. Modern Filipino culture was heavily influenced by the Malays, and many Filipino peoples have grown out of intermarriages between Malay and indigenous peoples into the Filipinos. In 1521, Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan would be the first European to discover the islands. Of course, the islands had already been discovered many times before by many different peoples, but, well, archipelago of San Lazaro. Easy peasy, right? Wrong. Unfortunately, or Raja, but a chieftain of the island of Mactan rebelled and defeated 48 armored Spaniards. Magellan died in the fight 6 weeks after he had discovered the Philippines. Magellan was killed. Not bad. Philippines claimed the islands for Spain and named them the Philippines after Prince Philip. Prince Philip would go on to become King Philip II of Spain, and the Philippines became part of the Spanish Empire. In 1872, 3 Filipino priests were entering an uprising of Filipino workers at a naval yard. The priests Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora, referred to as Gomburza, one of the earliest named portmanteaus. Benifer and Brangelina have nothing on these guys, became martyrs, and helped to inspire the beginnings of Philippine nationalist Jose Rizal, wrote a famous novel, Noli Me Tangere, The Lost Eden, which was a diatribe against Spanish administration and the religious orders in the Philippines. Easy peasy. Because of this, he was exiled from the Philippines. In 1896, while on the way to Cuba to serve as a doctor, Rizal was forced to return to Manila. Once there, he was arrested for revolution, tried, and sentenced to death by a firing squad. His execution set the country aflame, causing a revolution to break out. The women Philippines to America. The Filipinos were not down with this, though, and they declared independence and began a guerrilla war effort against the U.S. In 1902, the insurrection ended after the American governor of the Philippines, William Taft. Yes, the Taft that would one day be the 27th president of the USA. Improved economic conditions, settled disputes over land ownership, and allowed Filipinos to study in the US, which helped modernize the country. Easy Easy peasy. 30 years later, in 1934, the U.S. promised Philippine independence, to be effective in 1946, allowing plenty of time for this transition to take place. Philippines, and named Manuel Quezon y Molina as president. But in 1941, the Japanese invaded, because not even the Philippines could avoid World War II. The Japanese defeated General Douglas MacArthur, and President Quezon was forced to establish a government in exile. 3 years later, Quezon died, but Vice President Sergio Osmeña took over as president, and General MacArthur reinvaded the Philippines. Easy peasy. MacArthur liberated Manila. Great job! And then, President Osmeña established the government once more. And finally, in 1946, just like the U.S. promised, the Philippines became an independent nation. Manuel Roxas y Acuña was elected the first president of the new independent nation. Today, the Philippines is known for its rich biodiversity, rainforests, beaches, mountains, and as a great place for tourism. It produces and exports more coconuts than any other country in the world. Delicious! More than 90% of Filipinos speak English, and many are multilingual. In fact, the Philippines is the top supplier of nurses in the sick. And Filipinos love basketball and boxing. Tourists can visit volcanoes, some of them are still active, the Puerto Princesa Underground River, the Chocolate Hills, the Banao Rice Terraces, or the beautiful beaches of the island of Boracay. Great job, Philippines! If you love learning about the history of the Philippines, it's easy peasy to click to subscribe.
That's Philippine History 1. I'm just kidding. But before we go to that quiz, we would like to show beautiful and amazing Filipino attires first.
The Philippines is an archipelago of thousands of islands and islets. It stretches from the south of China to the northern tip of Borneo. The country has over 100 ethnic groups and a mixture of foreign influences which have molded its unique Filipino culture and traditions that we embrace today.
In humble appreciation, we are honored Filipino attires.
Our first pair, the Igorot. The Igorot attire is used by the tribes in the mountain province of the Cordillera Ranges. They have their own unique. The costume reflects their weight. The men wear long strips of hand-loom and loin called wanes or bahag. And the women wear a wrap-around skirt called lufit. The Igorot costume is very basic and simple.
Next, we have the malong. The malong is a traditionally used as garment of numerous tribes in the southern Philippines and the Sulu archipelago. Malong designs and styles indicate the village where they came from. Hand-woven malongs of silk and cotton fabric of intricate designs display the social and economic status of the wearer, but are for both men and women a blanket, a hammock, or a prayer mat.
Part of the Philippines, the Muslim women frequently woven with metallic threads and have overskirts and scarves draped over the shoulders. Women wear heavy gold necklace or headdress, usually elaborate umbrella is usually used by. The problem shows the mix of Arab, Malaysian, and Chinese influences. The barro is a colorless blouse influenced by the costume of the Blessed Virgin Mary brought by the Spanish missionaries in the 17th century. The saya, or skirt, was adapted from the basic lines of European skirt styles during the 1600s. The barro's saya is made of cotton fabric and colorful floral designs, matched with a lampay or square kerchief and tapis, an over-skirt wrapped around the long skirt. A bandana or handkerchief of contrasting color is wrapped around the head of the woman.
Next up, we have baitapis. Used then as overskirt, is worn by Tagalog women. It is usually worn with a lampay, a square kerchief of contrasting colors. This dress is fashioned out